The NFL thought the noise was finally dying down. The headlines were slowing, the speculation was cooling, and the league collectively exhaled, believing the Sanders storyline had run its course. Then, Shilo Sanders walked the red carpet at the NFL honors, and every assumption went straight out the window. This wasn't a casual appearance. This wasn't a family member tagging along for the cameras. This was a statement. Dressed sharp, carrying that unmistakable Sanders energy, Shilo showed up with purpose, and the football world felt it instantly. The message was clear before he even opened his mouth. This family isn't fading. They're just getting started. What made the moment hit differently wasn't just the look or the confidence, it was what came after. Midstream, Shilo dropped a piece of information that immediately had Cleveland's ears perking up. He announced he was heading to meet with Robert Saleh the following Tuesday, not a rumor, not speculation, a scheduled sit-down with one of the most talked-about coaching minds in the league right now. Browns fans were already doing the math before the stream even ended. AFC North teams were paying close attention because when the Sanders machine starts moving in a direction, it tends to arrive with momentum that most didn't account for. That meeting wasn't random. Nothing the Sanders family does is random. But before we get into where this is all headed, it's worth addressing something that's been circulating for the better part of 2 years, because the critics didn't hold back, and the narrative they pushed was persistent. Shedeur Sanders was called a diva. He was labeled selfish. There were whispers, and sometimes full-blown media segments, claiming he cared more about his personal brand than the players protecting him on the offensive line. That story got picked up, amplified, and repeated until a lot of people just accepted it as truth. So when Shilo settled into his streaming chair and started talking, he wasn't just having a casual conversation with his audience, he was methodically dismantling every piece of that narrative, one detail at a time. He kicked things off light, the way only a younger brother can. He said he's definitely Shedeur's favorite brother right now, stepping up to represent while his big brother navigates the transition. He talked about the 6 a.m. phone calls, Shedeur reaching out during meetings, missing that brotherly energy now that they're not side by side at practice every day. That part alone painted a picture most people never get to see. Two brothers who are genuinely close, not just connected by last name or football. But then, Shilo shifted gears. He got specific. He described Shedeur as someone who brings energy into a locker room, someone teammates gravitate toward naturally. And then he said something that stopped people mid-scroll. He mentioned that Shedeur would quietly slip him cash, that he would take care of costs without making a production of it. That small detail landed hard, because that's not the behavior of someone who's only thinking about himself. That's someone who moves through the world looking out for the people around him. And it didn't stop there. Shilo revealed something about Shedeur's plans at Colorado that reframes the entire selfish quarterback conversation entirely. Reportedly, Shedeur was in the process of building out a comprehensive NIL collective, not for himself, but for the whole team. The idea was to leverage his own platform, his own brand deals, his own influence to create financial pathways for his teammates, covering dinners, exploring ways to get his offensive linemen paid, structuring something that could benefit the people who showed up and grinded alongside him every single day. Think about what that actually means. Most college athletes are just trying to figure out their own NIL situation. Most quarterbacks at that level are focused on their draft stock and their personal growth.
Brand trajectory. Shedeur was reportedly sitting in meetings thinking about how to get his linemen some money. That doesn't fit the narrative. That completely obliterates it. Shilo was direct about it. He called his brother one of the most generous people he knows. And remember, this is coming from someone who has every reason to be real about it. This is family, not a publicist. When the person who roasts you the most calls you genuinely generous, that's a different kind of endorsement. That's the truth slipping out in the most natural way possible. The media framing of Shedeur Sanders as someone disconnected from his teammates never had a strong foundation to begin with. But Shilo didn't just poke holes in it, he took it apart completely, piece by piece, with the kind of first-hand detail that no press release could manufacture. Now here's where the story takes a turn that a lot of people overlooked because they were too focused on Shedeur. While all of this was happening, Shilo was quietly building something of his own, and the scope of it is more significant than most realize. He's gone all in on streaming. Twitch, YouTube, consistent content, real engagement with a growing audience. And before anyone dismisses that as a hobby or a side project, understand the context. Shilo has faced serious physical setbacks, forearm surgery, a plate and screws, a history of ACL trouble. The road back to the NFL isn't guaranteed, and he knows that better than anyone. Football is a brutal business with a short shelf life even for the healthiest players. Shilo is approaching his future with the kind of clarity that most athletes don't develop until their career is already over. He said it himself during his stream. He talked about how streaming is harder than people think. It's not just hitting record and playing games. It's hours of being on, engaging with chat, building a community from nothing, staying consistent when the numbers aren't where you want them yet. He acknowledged the grind, and then he acknowledged the gratitude. He said something that stuck, that what people deem impossible is actually achievable when you stay focused. That's not just a motivational quote. That's someone who has sat with uncertainty after a serious injury and decided to build something that can't be taken away by a torn ligament or a roster cut. That's foresight. And in an industry where financial security disappears faster than most people expect, that kind of thinking isn't just smart, it's necessary. Then came the comment that sent social media into a full frenzy. Shilo Sanders, completely relaxed in his streaming setup, casually mentioned that he still believes he has a shot at the Hall of Fame. One sentence, massive reaction. The critics immediately jumped in with injury history, limited playing time, the plate in his arm, all of it presented as evidence that the statement was delusional. But here's what those critics missed entirely. That comment wasn't a prediction, it wasn't denial, it was a mindset on full display. The Sanders family has been raised to operate without a ceiling on their expectations. Coach Prime didn't build his sons to think small, he built them to believe that preparation, health, and opportunity converging at the right moment can produce something extraordinary. When Shilo says Hall of Fame, he's not ignoring his injury history, he's refusing to let it define his ceiling. Before the injuries piled up, Shilo was making an impact that went beyond just his last name. Massive tackles, game-changing turnovers, defensive touchdowns. He was shifting momentum in real games against real competition. The physical ability was never the question. The instincts were never the question. The issue has been staying healthy long enough for those tools to operate at full capacity over a sustained period. If that alignment happens, if the body holds up, if
opportunity comes, a healthy, fully motivated Shilo Sanders is a genuine weapon in an NFL secondary. The Hall of Fame comment wasn't a fantasy, it was a window into how this family operates. They don't adjust their dreams based on current circumstances, they adjust their preparation. Meanwhile, Shedeur Sanders was doing something completely different at the same time, and doing it at the highest possible level. Radio Row during Super Bowl and Pro Bowl week is not an easy environment. It's relentless. There are cameras everywhere, analysts looking for any misstep, interviewers trying to catch rookies off guard, and enough pressure to make most first-year players visibly uncomfortable. Shedeur walked into that environment like he owned it, cracking jokes, highlighting the shoes, his upcoming Nike signature drop, pulling directly from the DNA of his father's diamond turf line, but modernized with new colorways, green, cream, and black. He called it heat, and the response from everyone who saw the previews confirmed he wasn't wrong. Nike doesn't extend this kind of treatment to just anyone. Signature-level promotion for a player who hasn't yet played a single NFL snap is a statement from one of the most selective brands on the planet. They did their research. They know what Shedeur Sanders represents in the marketplace. He moves merchandise. He connects with younger audiences on a frequency that most veterans never achieve. He understands visuals, timing, and how to make a product feel like culture rather than commerce. At Radio Row, every camera angle was an opportunity, and Shedeur clearly understood that. The watch caught the light. The shoes were front and center. The branding was sharp without feeling forced. That's not an accident. That's discipline. That's someone who has studied how this works and executes it with precision. But what made Radio Row truly revealing wasn't the polished moments, it was what happened when the cameras caught him off guard. The New York Post released a clip of Shedeur and Micah Parsons reacting to a mystery box. They thought it might be a snake. The tension built, the reactions escalated, and then it was a turtle. Shedeur recoiled, genuinely caught off guard, and the laughter that followed was completely unscripted. No image management, no calculated response, just a real moment between two people who were clearly comfortable around each other. And that matters more than people give it credit for. There's a version of the Shedeur Sanders story that paints him as overly polished, robotic, too calculated. That clip with Micah Parsons, one of the most respected defensive players in the entire league, tells a completely different story. Veterans like Parsons don't fake that kind of comfort. When they're relaxed around a rookie, that's organic respect. That's locker room credibility being displayed in real time. Now take a step back and look at the person who has quietly made all of this possible from behind the scenes. Because in every conversation about Coach Prime's legacy and Shedeur's draft stock and Shilo's comeback, one name keeps showing up without demanding credit: Shedeur Sanders. She's at the games, she's at family gatherings, she's consistently present, consistently organized, and consistently focused. While the spotlight chases the names everyone already knows, Shedeur is the one making sure the foundation holds. She's tracking schedules, keeping nutrition locked in, centering herself when the noise gets loud. She captures the moments other people miss. She keeps the family machine running smoothly at a time when the demands on everyone in that circle are enormous. This matters because fame without structure falls apart fast. The entertainment industry, the sports world, the media landscape, they're all filled with stories of people who had the talent and the
Platform, but not the foundation. The Sanders family doesn't have that problem, and a significant part of why they don't comes down to the environment Shedeur helped create. The way Shilo talks about her, the respect Shedeur demonstrates toward her, it's not performance, it's deeply embedded character showing itself in how they carry themselves. Growing up with a Hall of Fame father gives you a blueprint for excellence on the field. Having a mother who kept character at the center gives you something that can't be coached: integrity under pressure. That combination is rare, and it's a big reason why, for all the headlines and controversy surrounding this family, you never see the kind of chaos that derails other high-profile sports dynasties. Let's zoom out now and look at the full picture, because the individual stories are compelling, but the real power is in how they all connect. Shedeur Sanders isn't just a quarterback prospect. He's a franchise-level asset before he's taken a single NFL snap. The Nike partnership, the media intelligence displayed at Radio Row, the NIL leadership at Colorado, the peer respect from veterans like Micah Parsons. Each of those elements on its own is notable. Together, they form something that NFL franchises are increasingly recognizing as more valuable than most draft metrics can capture. Owners aren't just selecting players anymore, they're selecting the face of their organization, the person who will be on Good Morning America after a playoff win, the person who can sell luxury suites while representing a city, the person who can handle a tough media moment without creating a news cycle. Shedeur checks every one of those boxes, and he checks them naturally. And Shilo is building the same infrastructure on a parallel track. Football first, always, but streaming, content creation, direct audience connection running alongside it. The two lanes reinforce each other. If the NFL door opens wide, Shilo walks through it with momentum. If the road gets complicated by injuries or roster decisions, he's not starting from zero. He's already cultivated an audience that shows up consistently. He's already developed the skill set of engaging, entertaining, and building community online. That's not a backup plan. That's a second foundation. The distinction matters enormously. The Sanders family understands something about today's sports economy that most athletes don't figure out until it's too late. Brand equity, streaming revenue, sponsorship ecosystems, NIL structures, content licensing. These aren't extras, they're leverage, and leverage changes everything. It changes how contracts get negotiated. It changes how teams approach your value. It changes how you're treated when depth charts shift or coaching staffs turn over.
When your income and influence don't depend solely on a single team's decision, your voice carries differently, your options multiply, your career trajectory stops being entirely dictated by factors outside your control. For years, the path for athletes was linear and unforgiving. Perform, get drafted, sign the deal, and hope your body holds up long enough to make it worth something. The Sanders brothers are operating on a completely different model. They're building multiple revenue streams simultaneously. They're cultivating audiences that belong to them, not to a network or a team. They're leveraging their platform to create opportunities for others, which builds loyalty that money alone can't purchase. Shedeur reportedly investing in his teammates' financial situations through NIL structures isn't charity, it's strategy. Linemen who feel financially invested in by their quarterback protect differently. That's not a metaphor, that's a dynamic that plays out on every single snap. The critics will keep framing the Sanders family as a spectacle. They'll point to the Maybach, the red carpet appearances, the Hall of Fame comments, the Nike drops, and call it flash without substance. But that framing requires ignoring everything that's been documented about how this family actually
operates. The 6 a.m. phone calls between brothers, the meals Shedeur brought for teammates, the NIL collective he was building before he ever wore an NFL uniform, the streaming hours Shilo is putting in while rehabbing his body back to full strength, the quiet, steady presence of Pilar keeping the foundation from shaking when the noise gets loud. None of that fits the spectacle narrative. All of it points to something much more deliberate and much more durable. The AFC North meeting in Cleveland, the Nike launch in April, the streaming numbers climbing week by week, the draft board moving in real time. The Sanders machine is in motion, and the people paying the closest attention understand something that the casual observers are still working through. This isn't a family riding a moment. This is a family executing a plan. And the most interesting part of that plan is that it's nowhere near finished. What happens next in Cleveland? What happens when Shedeur steps onto an NFL field for the first time? What happens when Shilo gets his body back to full strength and gives the league another look at what he can do? Those chapters haven't been written yet. But if the blueprint so far is any indication, they're going to be worth watching very closely. The NFL thought the headlines were slowing down. They weren't slowing down. They were just building towards something bigger.